Provisions to ensure equal pay for equal work have been in place for decades, but a step change has yet to happen. WTW provides employers with confidence that their pay and benefits are fair and equitable, not just today, but into tomorrow.
Welcome to our latest video in the series providing pay clarity and visibility. My name is Eva Jasmiatka and I'm here with my colleague Tamsin Sridhara. In this video we're going to specifically focus on the EU Pay Transparency Directive and how companies are preparing for this. And we're going to share some of our latest learnings when we work with companies on this, and specifically in relation to data and analytics. Tamsin, welcome back and great to see you. As mentioned, today we're going to focus on data and analytics and the learnings that we have from working with companies on this. And maybe starting a bit broad, but what sort of activities have you seen companies undertake in relation to this?
I think the first activity is in relation to data. And what clients are wanting to do is to understand what are the data requirements resulting from the directive. So it's both listing out all the different types of data that are required and then understanding from where you are going to source that. The first thing, very practical. And then secondly, very practically again, is then doing some dry run in the analytics. And the purpose of that is to understand to what extent, again, are these analytics different from any other types of analytics that we're doing, and particularly if you're in a global company, to what extent are they different from the global approach being used to pay equity analytics?
Yeah, because they are indeed going to be quite different, isn't it? So then indeed focusing on that data element, what sort of themes or learnings are becoming apparent?
Okay. Thanks, Eva. Well, there are three key learnings. I think the first one is about the breadth of the data. So when you think about it, the EU directive is very clear that this applies to all pay and benefits. So you're going to need your pay and benefits data. But secondly, it says that all the numbers have to be calculated on an aggregate basis and on an hourly pay basis. So for any parts of your workforce where those hours differ, you're going to need real working time data. And often that will sit somewhere else in the organisation. And then thirdly, what it also provides is that to the extent that you have gaps that are above 5%, but you can explain those for objective reasons, then you won't need to take action. So the third pool of data you will need is about any type of objective reason. So that's about the breadth of the data. And then in terms of our next learning is about sort of accuracy. So having listed out all the data, what we found is then we've then started to collate those for any of these projects, is the quality and accuracy of those data will vary. So what that then tells us as a part of preparation is improving the accuracy and quality of the data. And then the last is about classification. So the directive provides that pay needs to be, some of the numbers need to be calculated in relation to basic wage, in relation to complementary wage, and then in relation to total pay. And what you want across markets is to ensure that the classification of different pay elements across those is consistent. So you've listed them out and then you've then classified them and made sure that those classifications are correct.
Yeah, and you're indeed highlighting there is going to be a lot of data involved, and getting it from different places, but also data quality could be a challenge or an issue. And that's also, like you said, why doing a dry run allows you as well to get a sense for that and highlight if there are any areas where you need to work on that data quality component.
Yeah, and very practically, for example, the data providers, so a lot of this data is going to come from payroll, isn't it, Eva? And that we know from the UK gender pay gap that often the payroll providers aren't yet equipped to provide that. So very practically, another consequence is having to revisit your service level agreements, whether it's with payroll or it may be a benefits provider or your share plan administrator, to make sure you're going to be able to get the right data in the right structure in the right time.
Yeah. So data quality, data access, really big and important element. Once you have the data and then running the analysis, is that then, you would say, relatively straightforward to do?
I wish, Eva, I could tell you it was, but from doing the dry runs is that there are a number of very practical lessons. I think the first is about it's much better to get going now on your data rather than waiting. So whatever data you've got, run with it, because just the process of running those analytics is going to tell you about, is your data ready? Have you got the capabilities alongside what are the outcomes? In terms of it being easy, we find that it's not easy, first of all, to do with the volume of numbers that you're going to have to calculate. So a lot of the people listening to this video will be used to either, for example, France, where you've got 5 different numbers you need to calculate, or UK gender pay gap, where you might have 8 numbers you need to calculate. The basic unit of compliance here is categories of workers. So if we think about, we've got 6 numbers per category of worker. If you've then got, let's say, just 10 levels to your organisation, that's 60 calculations per legal entity. And then you might have 10 countries. So that's sort of, you've got 600 numbers already. And then it maybe you've got more legal entities. So you can suddenly see how these numbers run from hundreds to thousands. So we found that there is a complexity simply in the volume of numbers needed to be calculated. And then the other element of complexity here is all the numbers we're used to calculating have always been done on a let's call them on an unadjusted, a sort of simple mathematical sort of averages. And what the directive is now providing is, in addition to running those numbers, it's saying that if you've got any of those total pay gaps are 5% or above, and you can't explain them by objective reasons, then you need to take action. So companies will then need to be able to say, against those gaps, is what then can I explain by objective reasons? So whether that, for example, may be related to employees. So I may need to make adjustments for those to that data to make sure I'm comparing like employees. So, and that you'll need to also take account of pay elements. So it may be that some of the difference is due to pay or benefit elements where there's an element of choice to it. So you want to take account of that because the difference is due to choice. And so you can see you've got that process of sort of whittling away what are the objective reasons for difference to then come up with what you and I might call adjusted numbers or clean numbers. And that's a second set of numbers. So, we can already see you've got clean numbers and raw unadjusted numbers and clean adjusted numbers running across all these analytics.
Yeah. And what we've been seeing as well is that the additional complexity, especially with the directive, is that benefits are part of all of this. And this is also what you've highlighted, where often the big difference is with any existing pay equity analysis that companies might be running, which is typically more focused on base pay and, for example, variable pay. But now with all the other pay elements in the mix, when it comes to being able to explain, can we explain the difference, you'll be looking at quite a different process that you would need to follow. And that's also one of the other benefits of doing already a dry run, so that you can start testing what is actually for us the methodology to go about this, so that we can replicate that once the directive comes into force and we build that into our annual process.
And I think, you're right in the analytics, because this is where for a lot of organisations we're finding there's a real advantage to using regression and analytics, because it allows us a very efficient way to take account of those objective factors. So the other learning in this is we need the time to build capability and familiarity within companies around running a more sophisticated level of analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the companies that you're working with on this journey, what are the typical next steps for them?
So once we've run the dry run, often there are 3 different outputs or actions following those. First of all, the analytics themselves will tell you what's working and not what's working and how you're managing pay. So there'll be insights on, have we got unexplained difference in relation to base pay or in relation to a particular type of bonus? So those insights you can take and say, okay, within our roadmap, we therefore need to ensure that we're taking steps to improve the governance around those 2. What the analytics will also do, it'll highlight where you have got employees who are so paid so far below what you were expecting that you will need to take specific action on those employees, and that's being fed automatically, it's being fed into some ad hoc pay increases, or it may be fed into the next annual cycle. And then the third step, it's also making companies think about the communication of numbers, because what it highlights is a big gap between the numbers that you're used to seeing as an employee and then these very sort of crude aggregate numbers from the directive, which employees just won't recognise. And do you then want to be bridging the gap between those of also voluntarily disclosing the numbers that's going to be more meaningful and more familiar?
Yeah, and that's picking up on that last point, where the narrative that you're going to lead with is going to be absolutely key and critical in all of this, to make sure that as an organization you're landing this in the right way within the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at heart this is about good communication and it's about change management.
Yeah. And that's actually a really good segue into another big topic that we will be discussing in our next video, where we'll focus more on the narrative and stakeholder engagement. Tamsin, thank you very much for sharing all of your experience and learnings, hugely valuable, and I hope as well that you found it valuable. As mentioned, we'll be launching another video soon in relation to stakeholder engagement. Be on the lookout for that, but thank you very much for watching this video.